bear children with her husband. But his other wife, Peninnah, was blessed to have had sons and daughters with their husbands. And each year it was customary for the family to travel from their home to Shiloh, the place where they would offer sacrifices and worship the Lord. Because the Lord had kept Hannah from being able to bear children, Peninnah would taunt her year after year after year whenever they would travel to Shiloh for the sacrifice. And now Hannah would cry and she would be depressed and she would refrain from eating as a result of Peninnah's torment. But their husband loved Hannah deeply, and he would question her about her tears and about why she wouldn't eat. And he even asked her, isn't having meat better than having 10 children? But there was nothing sufficient enough to fill this void that Hannah was experiencing due to her inability to be able to have a child of her own. Right. So one year while they were in Shiloh, after a sacrificial meal, Hannah got up and she went to pray. And while she was praying, she was crying in anguish and she was asking God to give her a son. And while she was praying this prayer, Hannah made a vow back to the Lord. And she said that, God, if you recognize my sorrow and if you answer my prayer for a son, then I'm going to dedicate this son back to you. And she also vowed that as a physical representation that her son had been dedicated to the Lord, that she would never cut his hair. And while she was praying, the priest Eli, he watched, and initially he thought that she was drunk because Hannah was praying, but she was praying in her heart. So her lips moved, but no words came out. So he told her, to take her wine basically and to go. But after she explained to him what her situation was, Eli instructed her to go in peace and asked that God would grant whatever her request was. So when they returned home, Hannah and her husband, they slept together, and Hannah, she became pregnant. And the Bible says that in due time, she gave birth to Samuel, their first son. So the next year, Samuel and Hannah, they didn't travel with the family to Shiloh. Hannah told her husband that she was going to wait until he was old enough and had been weaned from nursing to take him to the tabernacle, and then she would leave him there to be with the Lord forever. So without question, he agreed and he went on. So once Samuel was old enough and he was weaned, then they took him to Shiloh. They sacrificed the bull. They left Samuel with Eli, and afterwards they worshiped the Lord. Then Hannah prayed a powerful prayer of praise to the Lord for granting her request, and then they returned home without Samuel, and he goes on to serve the Lord by assisting Eli. So that's the synopsis of who Hannah was. So now looking at Hannah in her transition.
Teach us, Tiff.
During the times that these events were taking place, being barren was a reason within itself to be ashamed and to be disgraced. So if we go back and we review Hannah's life, she had a husband who loved her unconditionally in spite of the embarrassment that others may have thought that she brought to him. But she had to share him with a woman who taunted and despised her. And then she had this huge void within her due to her barrenness. She was depressed and she was lonely. But Hannah's transformation occurred that evening in Shiloh when she made the decision to no longer miss another meal, to no longer cry about the taunting and the void that she was experiencing in her life, but instead she decided to draw closer to the Lord in prayer. This was the night that Hannah traded in her self-pity for her hope and her frustrations for her faith. Hannah realized that she could not change her situation alone, but instead she could change her reaction to her situation. So the mere fact that she decided to step outside of her normal reaction to her situation and to go to the Lord and to ask him for a son and then make a vow to give her son back to him took great faith and great confidence in the ability of our God. The Lord then recognized what a triumph this was for Hannah, and he blessed Hannah when he knew that she would be able to appreciate the blessing. He blessed her based upon his time and not based upon Hannah's time. And that's something that we struggle with. We want things in our time. But if we get it,
you are teaching, girl.
We might not be ready for it.
That's right.
So as a result of Hannah's blessing, she was faithful and she stood by her vow. She gave up the very thing that she had been hoping for, the very thing that she had been praying for year after year after year. She could have easily become so attached to Samuel that she had a fear of of being lonely again and having a void again, that it caused her to retract her vow that she made to the Lord. But instead, she did just as she promised she would do, and she dedicated her son to the Lord. And as a part of her transition, she became faithful, she became fervent in her worship, and she became fearless. She was no longer afraid of what others would have to say about her, and some could have found reasons to criticize her for leaving her son in a tabernacle with someone who wasn't his family to grow up alone. But her commitment to God was far greater than any criticism that she could have received or ever encountered from anybody else. So the Lord waited until Hannah got to a point where she realized that she had no other choice but to depend on him to show himself great in her situation. It was at this point that she began to transition, and the woman who at one point could not bear children was not only blessed with a son, but was blessed to give birth to the prophet Samuel. And then
Teach us.
with 5 more children. So Peninnah's attempts to torment and to break Hannah only pushed her closer and closer to her blessing. And at a time when Hannah could have easily retaliated, she didn't. So if you take nothing else away from this recap of Hannah's life, there's 3 characteristics that she put on during her transition.
All right. She got points, boy. She got points.
For my own life. So first, she was fervent in her worship. We have to be enthusiastic about our devotion to our God. James 5:16 says that the effectual fervent prayer of a
Corresponding scriptures. Tiffany!
So not only did God hear her prayer, but he answered her prayer. Not only did Hannah pray and make a vow, she was faithful and followed through with her vow, and followed her vow with a prayer of praise to the Lord. And what I like about Hannah's prayer of praise is what it states in the first 3 verses. Hannah recognized her own transformation. And if we look at just the first 3 verses in the New Living Translation, it says, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. Now I have an answer for my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me. No one is holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Stop acting so proud and haughty. Don't speak with such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows what you have done, and he will judge you for your actions." So the second characteristic is she was faithful. And according to my New Application Study Bible, to be faithful is to be firm in adherence. And Hannah was certainly firm in her adherence. She put all her own wants to the side, and she stood by her word and by her vow to the Lord. Lastly, she was fearless. We can't be afraid of others' opinions or of others' criticism of us when it comes to our servanthood in God. 1 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of a sound mind." And once Hannah was able to triumph over her fears, she was powerful. She was able to exercise this power in her prayer and in her actions. She was able to love, and she was able to take on a sound mind, no longer concerned with the evil doings of those around her. So Hannah's story is one of transformation, triumph, victory, breakthrough, overcoming, and obedience. And it's my prayer that at the conclusion of our conference on Sunday night, that we're all able to become triumphant, victorious, overcomers, experience a well-needed breakthrough, and walk in obedience to our God. I love you and God bless you.